Welcome to Memorial Cooking Innovations. I'm Tim Scallon, registered dietitian, and with me today is my good friend and colleague, Chef Mike Hodgkin. Chef Mike, welcome back to Memorial Cooking Innovations.
Well, thank you for bringing me back.
You know, Chef Mike is Director of Food and Nutrition Services here at CHI St. Luke's Memorial. And so, you know, that you're not only a practicing chef, but also you run a very important department in the hospital.
Yeah, it's a pretty large department. They keep us pretty busy.
Yeah?
Yeah, they keep us pretty busy.
Well, one of the things that we want to do today is I want to do my pizza recipe that I've developed. And of course, naturally, I want to get the chef's input on my recipe. And so when we get this put together and you taste it, well, you can tell me whether I succeeded or not.
Oh,
okay?
yes. It should be entertaining.
Okay, so in order to make a good pizza, I want to get my Italian genes flowing.
There you go.
And so, do you have any Italian in you?
No, the only what I eat. That's it. Yeah.
So when you eat pizza, you got Italian in you?
Oh, yes, I do. For a moment, anyway.
Well, okay, so getting those genes flowing, you know, one thing I found is music helps.
Yes, it does.
Hits
You hear that?
like a
Very
big
soothing.
pizza
Okay, all right, and very Italian.
Yes. Yes.
Well, and another thing that can help when you're having fun in the kitchen, which is pizza is a fun thing, you know, having a glass of Chianti is...
It always brightens the day.
It does, that's right. It makes pizza making a lot more fun. Okay, so we've got those genes started. Now let's just kind of put ourselves into Italy and thinking about what all we get from Italy. So for example, all the things that come to us from Italy. Leonardo da Vinci,
Spaghetti pomodoro.
Michelangelo,
Fettuccine Alfredo.
Saint Francis of Assisi.
Sophia Loren.
Now that's Italian.
That's Italian. Yes.
Okay, so so we got a good start, but you know what? Out of all of those things I like the best, pizza.
Yeah, pizza would be up there.
Imagine a world without pizza.
Oh, yes. One less thing, yes.
Okay, so getting started, this recipe makes two 14-inch pizzas.
Yeah.
And you know, when you make a fresh-made crust, which is what I'm going to do today, you're going to be glad you made two pizzas.
Oh, that's right. That's right. The crust is the foundation. It starts with that.
Well, you know, that's what I've noticed, that some people will take a pre-made crust and put fresh ingredients on it. But isn't that backwards?
Well, to me, it's like putting fresh ingredients on cardboard. It just doesn't cut it. It really doesn't.
I mean, actually, this crust that I'm going to make today, it actually freezes pretty well.
Right.
But it's a lot better than like a frozen crust or like a dried crust that you get. There's just no flavor there.
No, there isn't. Like I say, it tastes like cardboard.
Yeah.
It really does.
Okay, well, so let's get started. You want to?
Sure.
Okay. Okay, so we're going to start with some warm water, and basically this is a cup of water that I just stuck in the microwave for about 30 minutes. 30 seconds. And of course, you know, microwaves vary,
Right.
and this is an important thing. We don't want it to be too warm, or
Right.
else it'll kill the yeast, but you want it to be warm enough that it gets the yeast to percolate. And it also, when it's warm, it helps them to dissolve. So we're going to just get this started dissolving. And then another important step in making any bread dough, and that's basically what this is, it's just a fresh bread recipe, is to feed the yeast. And yeast loves sugar, so we're going to put a teaspoon of sugar. And I'm actually going to kind of sprinkle that in there. And we want this to dissolve, so we're just going to stir it a little bit. I've got a little bit of yeast that it's starting to clump a little bit. I'm going to break those clumps up. Okay. All right, and then once that's starting to dissolve, which it doesn't take long, I'm going to add some oil and some salt. So I'm going to put a half teaspoon of salt. Now, you know, some chefs don't really measure. Do you measure?
Very seldom.
Well, see, dietitians have to measure. You know, it's a dietitian
Well,
thing.
it's not the idea of not measuring. The idea is knowing that that's going to be a quarter of a teaspoon.
Okay, so
Yeah, you know what a dash and everything is. I think I mentioned it before the last TV show. I figured out what a pinch of salt was.
yes.
And it's 4 grains. So in case
Okay.
anybody's wondering about that, it's probably a question in everybody's mind, and since the dawn of cooking, but
How much is a pinch of salt
is
anyway?
supposed to be 4 grains.
Okay. All right. Now I'm going to stir this oil, salt, water, and yeast up. And by now the yeast is nice and dissolved.
Yeah.
And now, do you ever make bread at home?
No.
So you're not.
I used to have a bread machine once, and
Yeah.
they never could get that to work. And
Yeah.
speaking of work, it's a lot of work.
Well,
So
and you know, when you're making pizza crust, I mean, granted, this is a time-consuming thing. Now we want 3
Yeah.
cups of flour, so I'm going to start with 2.
yeah,
And then I'm going to start stirring that around. And technically, this could be 3 level cups of flour. And you know, for those of you who don't know, a level cup of anything or a level teaspoon is that, and leveled off. But you know, bread dough is a very forgiving thing to make, and so
it is. Well, just like in the flour, as you're starting to knead it, you're gonna, as it kneads, it's gonna require a little more flour, and you're gonna
Yep.
add the flour to get the right
Yep.
consistency.
Yep.
So you go by consistency more than anything else.
That's right. In fact, this is a good place to remind our viewers that a recipe is a guideline.
Yes,
It's
yes.
just a guideline.
Well, just like with the yeast, if you were up in, say, New England area,
Yep.
the water up there is very hard. I think it has chemicals in the water up north where yeast won't grow very well. Because the bread, if you made homemade bread up north, it comes out like a little brick. Bring the same recipe south, and it comes up to the nice fluffy bread that we have here in the south.
And it's because the yeast doesn't do well up there.
Yeah, the water is different. It's
okay.
got different minerals in
Minerals
the water.
in it that inhibit the yeast.
Yes.
Well, speaking of inhibiting the yeast, one of the things that will inhibit yeast is temperature.
Yes,
If it's
definitely.
too hot.
Temperature, and I've never done it, but I was told if you live in Colorado,
Yes.
the
altitude.
altitude messes it up.
Well, yes, that's right.
And the different brands of yeast. Some is just fresher and grows better than others. So it's a plaything. You got to look at it as a guide, like you said.
Well, and also on your yeast on your yeast there's a date, and so you always have to check your yeast when you buy it at the store that it's still in
Yeah,
date.
because yeast is a living thing.
That's right.
It's a living thing.
And it doesn't live forever.
Right.
Okay, so now you can kind of see how this is starting to at least form a dough. Now it's still way too sticky to handle, so at this stage all I'm going to do is keep adding flour until I can handle it. And so I'm going to use this spoon to kind of work this flour into the dough. And actually, although I'm not going to do it today this way, you could do all of your kneading in the bowl. You wouldn't have to get it out on a floured surface. Now I'm going to do it the traditional way, but one of the things that I'm doing, in addition to mixing flour into this dough, making it drier and drier gradually, that's one of the things I'm doing, but I'm also beginning to develop the gluten in the dough.
Right.
Now there's that G word.
Yeah.
It's very, very popular diagnosis these days of gluten intolerance. And what I would tell you as a dietitian is that gluten intolerance, real gluten intolerance, is much more rare than the popularity of the self-diagnosis. And in fact, literally, gluten intolerance is lacking the enzyme to digest the protein in this flour, which is gluten.
Well, you said it already by saying self-diagnosis.
Yeah.
Yeah, that right there is a good reason why a lot of people, bread isn't the best thing in the world to eat. You don't need an excuse not to eat it. You know,
Well,
it's always very enjoyable, but
well, now, Mike, I'm gonna beg to differ with you on that, because bread is something that if we flavor it with a lot of fats,
right,
or if we fry it, for
Right.
example, that's probably something we should limit. But bread is the staff of life.
right. Well, you're right. It's just like a potato. Potatoes are fine. It's
Yeah.
the sour cream, butter, and bacon everybody puts on it
What
that
we,
ruin it.
what
you
we
know?
flavor it with. That's
Yeah.
exactly
So
right.
You're right. Yeah, I'll stay corrected.
Yeah.
The bread's fine.
Yeah. And in this case, you know, we're going to be making a meal that's actually very balanced.
Yeah.
You know, and we'll talk more about that a little later. But right now, I'm still just getting this to where, and you notice how I'm using my knuckles to kind of knead this. I'm also just pressing this flour into the bread. And here in a minute, I'm going to get this out on the...
If they can show it in the camera, if they could show the bottom of your bowl and how it's kind of sticking to the bowl.
Yes.
If you had a stand-up mixer,
Yes.
one of those countertop mixers,
Yes.
what we used to say when you're making like pizza dough
Yeah.
is you put the flour until the dough will actually clean the bowl.
Okay.
Then
Like
you
this.
Know then it'll actually draw the flour from the bowl, and it will clean the bowl right up.
Okay.
It'll form a ball.
Huh.
Then you know it's got enough flour in it, so you can start playing with it on the counter.
And you know, the mixers that he's talking about, like in the dietary department, stand this tall.
Oh
huh?
yeah, they're 200-300-pound mixers.
Yeah.
But the countertop mixer will do the same
Same
thing.
same thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. This is getting close to being ready.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to put. Now, see, that's still that third cup of flour.
Yeah.
And that's what the recipe calls for: 3 cups of flour. But remember, I may need to add a little bit more.
Right.
If it's not, if it warrants it. Now, the traditional way, I'm going to set this right here. And let's see, let's set it right over here. Maybe you can see better what I'm doing. Can y'all see that okay? Mm-hmm. Okay.
Now you know there's a reason for all the kneading you do.
Tell me,
Okay.
I need this dough.
Yeah, you need the dough. If you ever think about it, when you do biscuits or
Yes.
pancakes,
Yes.
they'll usually tell you in the recipe, like if you do biscuits, you cut the shortening in. You never touch it with your hands, or very, very minimal use of the rolling pin or anything.
Okay.
And biscuits are flaky.
Okay.
Pie crust, you make a pie crust, bam, bam, fold it over,
Okay.
roll it out, you're done.
Okay.
The more you knead the dough, the more you're causing the gluten to react to the
Yes.
temperature of your hands.
Yes.
And it's making the dough where you can pull it
Well, in
and
fact,
flip it into all the things.
okay. So what you're talking
Toughens it up.
well, it's making it more elastic.
Yeah, that's the word, right.
And in fact, technically, that's what developing the gluten is.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm glad you said that, because I started talking about that, but then I got off on talking about gluten intolerance.
Yeah.
But developing the gluten, and you notice this, as this dough gets more and more elastic, that's literally making that protein, so that whenever the yeast begins to rise, it makes the dough have elasticity, so it'll rise with the
Exactly.
gas formation.
Exactly.
Now, a variation on this recipe, we're just using white flour on this, but a variation is you could add some wheat flour to this. Now, here's what I've learned from that. You know, when the young dietitian started making pizza dough, he was thinking, oh, okay, I want to increase the fiber.
Right.
But you know what happens if you put too much in there.
Right. Yeah.
It's too dense.
Yeah. It's like a little brick.
Yeah, and in fact,
I think 50-50 is the most usable.
well, actually, what I've learned on something like this is not even that.
Not even
like
that.
in these 3 cups, if I was going to add some 100% wheat flour, I would add a 1/4 cup,
Really? That all?
half at the
Okay.
most.
Okay.
And because in this dough, what we're going to do is we're going to roll this out real thin. We're going to divide this into 2, roll it out real thin into a 14-inch. But what we want is that real thin crust to leaven up and be light and fluffy.
Right.
Well, if it's got too much wheat flour, it'll be
won't.
hard.
Right.
Yeah, it won't be light and fluffy. Mike, I think this is just about ready.
Yeah, you see how it cleaned the board right up? There's nothing left,
yeah.
no residues?
Yeah, and in fact, we're going to use this same bowl. Well, actually, it didn't clean up as good as what you told me, but it's close enough. Now, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to form it into a nice ball, and then I'm going to take a little bit of olive oil and rub on the top of it. And what I'm doing there is I'm sealing the air, the gas that the
Right.
yeast produces, so that it'll stay.
And
All
it'll
right.
also help prevent that little crust like on pudding
it keeps it soft, doesn't it? Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah. And then what we're going to do is we're just going to take a towel and put this over it and put this in a warm place. Like, for example, put it on your oven that you've preheated. Don't let it get too hot. You know, like this bowl is perfect. It's ceramic, not plastic.
Right.
Good for being conducting heat. And so we're going to set this aside for now, let it rise until it's double in size, and then it'll be ready to roll out.
Yep, should be good.
When we make this sauce as a chef, you're probably not going to think too much of this, but one of the things I want to tell our viewers is if we're spending our prep time on making the dough, we can take a few shortcuts.
Oh, sure.
So, for example, what I've found makes an excellent pizza sauce is just a can of diced tomatoes. Get the one that says no added salt. Okay. Diced tomatoes, no added salt, and so that's going to be part of it. All right. And then basically just a can of tomato paste, okay, which adds a real rich flavor. And what we're going to do is just blend these two together, and it takes a little stirring to get those stirred together. Now, if you were making this as a chef, now tell our viewers what you would do to make a pizza sauce.
To me, I'd take and make a marinara sauce.
Okay.
To me, it's a basic vegetarian type tomato sauce. The peppers, started with peppers, onions, garlic, saute them up, add your diced tomatoes, cook them down.
Yep.
But you're right, you're talking 2 or 3 hours just for the sauce. I would have started that probably yesterday to make the pizza today. Well,
okay, now here's another one. So we could start our marinara sauce in the morning and have have spaghetti for lunch.
That's right.
And then do pizza for supper.
There you go. But it's kind of funny. I remember growing up when I saw that can of tomato paste. Yeah. There used to be a thing called minute pizzas. And you take English muffins, put tomato paste over it, little cheese, peppers, and onions. And that was probably my introduction to pizza way back when.
Well, you know, this makes a good, thick, chunky sauce. That's what I like about it. Now, I'm going to add some fresh parsley because it's just going to add some fresh flavor. And, you know, one of the things I've learned from Memorial Cooking Innovations, working around you guys, is that parsley just goes in almost everything.
Oh, yeah. It does give it a clean taste and gives it a little bit of nature, I say.
Yeah. And then, you know what? That's all there is to this. So we're going to set this aside and let the flavors blend. And then we're going to roll that crust out. Well, we're doubled in size.
Nice and puffy.
Yep. So we're going to get him out. All right, let's set this aside. Mike, if you just set that over there for me. Now, what I want to do right now is form this into a tube, basically, a cylinder that's equal. And basically all I'm doing here is I want to divide it equally because this is going to go on, I'm going to divide it on 2 14-inch crusts. And the best way to divide this equally is just to cut him in half. So we're going to do that right there. And this one we're going to save for later. Mike, let's just put him in here for right now. Actually, let's just put him back in that bowl.
All right.
And later we'll put him in a plastic bag, write a label on it with the date, and put him in the freezer.
Yeah, that's the one thing about yeast. It's an amazing thing about yeast is even though it is a living thing, when you freeze it, it goes into a hibernation. And that is the big difference between having a good crust from the store and a not so good a crust from the store. When you're in the grocery store and it says self-rising and it doesn't say par-baked or pre-baked, then you can take it out of the freezer, it'll rise again just like you just made it and make a pizza, and the crust is so much better. It's 100% better. So it's something when you're in the store, if you're buying a frozen dough, always look for that par-baked or pre-baked and don't buy it.
And so that's when you get a crust that doesn't taste like cardboard.
It would taste it would taste like a real professional crust.
Little cooking spray on this pizza pan. That'll save us a little later. Okay, now what we want to do is we want to roll this out, and our objective is to roll from the middle because we want to get that crust spread out as evenly as we can. And so you notice I'm actually going in the 4 cardinal directions, you might say. Now, as you get it rolled out a little bit more, you can start doing this with it. But your objective is to get it rolled thin from the middle until you get it where you want it. What I'm doing right now is I've gotten everything from the middle. Now I'm trying to find on the edges where is that last inch that I can get out. It's not right there. Okay, now what I want to do is to get this on that pan. I'm going to be very careful because it's pretty thin, so I don't want to break it. I'm going to fold him in half, and then I'm going to fold him in half again, and then he's ready to go right here. And then we're going to open him up again. All right. Now we're going to use our hands. Now in this part, you're being careful not to tear your crust. And what I'm doing, if you'll notice, I'm kind of pulling not just from here to here, but from here to here, which keeps me from tearing the crust. And it's no big deal if you tear it. I mean, when you make the pizza, when you cook it, it's going to be fine. But it's better if you don't. And then the last step on this is, what we want to do is we want to oil this crust for the same reason we did when we oiled it to proof.
I know it gives it a little extra flavor.
It does.
That olive oil is so good.
Adds a wonderful flavor. And of course, you know, the extra virgin olive oil, that flavor was made for pizza. Okay, last step.
Seasonings.
Yeah, and actually what I'm going to put on this, Mike, is I'm going to season it with a little bit of fresh oregano. Got this, this isn't oregano. Got this oregano out of my herb garden this morning. And what I did is I took a piece of this. And incidentally, when you're picking your herbs, like if you buy that little plastic thing of herbs at Brookshire Brothers, for example, and you're going to pay $5 for that, take it out of that, water it, and then put it in something like this. Put a little water in the thing. And you know, this will stay in the fridge for a week or two.
Right.
So what I did is I just diced some of that fresh oregano. And I'm going to season this. And then also, spread this around a little bit. Got fresh thyme here that I'm just going to pull these leaves off. They pull better if you pull them backwards towards the stem. So you don't, that's not something you have to cut. And this just adds a good fresh flavor. You could if you had some fresh basil.
I just got to say, I'm surprised you didn't have fresh basil.
Well, I use it sometimes. Yeah. I just didn't put it on this pizza. But of course, you know, anything tomato, basil goes good.
You're right.
With. Okay, and so that's got our crust seasoned. Now we're going to set this aside and let it rise for a little bit. Okay, so what do you think?
I think it's beautiful.
All right, well, Mike, I think we are ready to put that thing in the oven, and then we're going to eat some pizza.
Very good. I'm waiting.
You know how we were talking about a pizza can get soggy in the middle? Well, there are actually pans designed to offset that. This particular pan is perforated for even heat distribution. And there are other designs, like for example, this pizza stone. I know this looks terribly dirty, but a pizza stone, as you use it, it stains. I promise you this is clean. That's just how pizza stones are. But it makes a great pizza. Notice how the ridges on the bottom cause even heat distribution. That's what this pizza stone is designed for. Now, when you're making a thin crust pizza, this is less of an issue, okay? Because thin crust, as long as you don't pile it up too much in the center. If it's a thick crust pizza, pans like this or how you build a pizza makes a difference. And incidentally, this recipe makes two 14-inch pizzas out of one batch of dough. They're thin crust. If you wanted it to be a thick crust, we'll just use the whole batch and make one pizza. And so just a little bit about pizza pan design and how and why they're designed the way they are. Okay, Mike, how are we looking?
Oh, it's looking pretty good.
Ooh, that smells delicious. What's that pepperoni doing on there?
Yeah, I don't know. It must have been a pepperoni fairy around somewhere. It's a good thing we had one.
You know what? You're turning into one of my favorite chefs. You know that?
I tell you, well, I'll make it taste good. It may not be the best for you, but I'll make it taste good.
Well, I think we need to eat this pizza. Well, while you're cutting that, I just want to tell you that today I've shared with you my recipe for a delicious homemade pizza. And just as Mike pointed out, there are many different ingredients to put on a pizza. So be creative. Pizza is art. Making pizza can be as fun as eating it. Now, we've learned the basics of fresh bread making and preparing a pizza crust. And we've learned that by putting our time into making a fresh crust, we can take a shortcut on the sauce. And now, I think we have a pizza to eat. Chef Mike, what do you think?
It looks good to me.
Join us next time as we continue changing the world one bite at a time. Memorial Cooking Innovations is made possible through the generous efforts of Brookshire Brothers, a celebration of family and community, CHI St. Luke's Memorial, the Polk Education Center, Sodexo Food Service, and the City of Lufkin, KLTX Channel 15.